5 judges appointed to New Brunswick's courts had personal links with a Canadian politician. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Let's start today off with a quote from our Federal Justice Minister. All judicial appointments are made on the basis of merit. Wrong. Now I really wish it was true, but clearly it's a lie. And today's story will make that painfully obvious. According to the CBC, federal Liberals have been promising to appoint the most meritorious jurists to positions across Canada. In reality though, most Canadians winning appointments in New Brunswick seem to have a common theme. 5 of the last 6 federal appointees had personal connections to Dominic LeBlanc. Now you might be wondering, who is Dominic LeBlanc? He's a New Brunswick MP and he serves as the Federal Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. In other words, he has status and power. The latest evidence points towards him using his position to influence which judges get jobs. You'll have to hear this to believe it. One of the 5 new judges is Dominic's neighbor. The second is a family relative, and the other 3 are lawyers who personally helped him retire his debts from a failed 2008 leadership campaign. How very convenient for you, Dominic. All your closest friends are judge-worthy. Crazy stuff. His neighbor and relative, well, they had to be exceptionally qualified to get their position. He's also kindly rewarded people who once saved his ass. If anyone still thinks the federal government is appointing positions based on merit alone, they will need a wake-up call. This is a blatant example of nepotism, and I want LeBlanc to step down and to have his appointees removed. There is no place for this in the Canadian government. The gravity of the situation is immense. We're talking about our legal system here, and selecting the people who have the power to interpret and shape it, that is no laughing matter. That comes with a whole swath of consequences, even beyond just not selecting the most qualified people. It's not a matter of stagnation. It can be a massive regression. Imagine now, you have a team of judges who owe you their very job. You got them into the position. 5 judges who owe you. A team of judges like that, they're your friends. You can call in favors at any time. Well, what's to stop them from ruling in alignment with whatever LeBlanc wants them to suit his agenda? This also makes LeBlanc the most attractive MP to bribe in all of New Brunswick. If you had to pour all of your money into one politician to get things done, he's your guy. He's a funnel that comes with direct access to the courts. I want to know, who are your campaign donors? I'm sure those are going to be critical players now. They're his people, and you need to keep an eye on that because their interests are now intertwined with the court system. If you see any exceptions or rulings that are coming down kind of weirdly in New Brunswick, you already know what's up. This also takes positions away from people who truly deserve to be there. I don't want lackeys and yes men to be anywhere near the judicial system. We have the separation of powers for a reason, and this feels like a blatant attempt to undermine that. The reason why you don't join the judiciary with Parliament or the executive government is to ensure that one branch does not become a tyrant. The rule of law is the great equalizer that keeps all of these parties in check. Now you've got people within that system, within the judiciary, who are representatives on behalf of an MP? How asinine is that? This really isn't rocket science. He's basically spelled out how deeply corruption is running within his own party. To let that go unmatched, to let it go unchecked, and let's make one thing very clear. It probably wasn't LeBlanc acting on his own. Although he has status and power, there are councils and there are higher powers who have to approve these appointments as well. It's an inside job, and it points towards a very disappointing party. So obviously, reporters and journalists are coming hard at LeBlanc to try to get answers. His office is dodging all questions, which is a telltale sign that he's worried, but his press secretariat issued a statement. Listen to how silly this is. All judicial appointments are made on the basis of merit. As with all Canadian citizens, judicial candidates are free to engage personally in political activities. The appointment process neither disqualifies nor privileges an applicant on the basis of political association. What a load of crap. I don't know how they can issue such a blatant lie and try to masquerade like it's the truth. It's really some dishonest stuff. Judicial candidates are free to engage in political activity. True, but when 5 of the last 6 judges have intimate relations with the MP in New Brunswick, you can't really say with a straight face that nepotism did not play a part in that. Maybe he hooked up one of his friends, it would be a different story. Maybe even 2 judges, but he's flooding the appointments now. It's already up to 5, and who knows how many came before and how many are going to come in the future if he's not forced to step down. I'm not sure who they think they're trying to fool with this. I would have enjoyed seeing them make the statement in front of a panel. They would have torn him apart, and that's probably why they're dodging journalists and newspapers and media, because the hard questions, they wouldn't be able to answer it. They would get torn up. The only way they're comfortable is putting out a statement, something that can't be rebutted directly. You have someone like me talking about it on my own platform, but it's not face-to-face with them. They're not on the spot, and they're not forced to answer anything right now, or even in the future. This is the coward way to try and make things go away. So one important thing to note is that this is not an isolated incident either. It's part of a larger trend. CBC reports that in 2010, a study looked at 856 judicial appointments in Canada over a 15-year period. Political connections were involved in New Brunswick's appointments nearly 77% of the time. That is double the national average. So, some provinces have it worse than others, and New Brunswick is seemingly at the bottom. That's not to say that 77%, that's the figure that they were given, and all those candidates were a product of nepotism, but I still think it's safe to conclude that the vast majority probably are. Such an egregious trend, it's very disappointing, and I'm not too sure why it's even allowed to continue to prosper. So here's a tidbit from the article that I did have a disagreement with though. Canada's Office of the Commissioner for Federal Judicial Affairs, wow, that's a pretty long title, will not reveal if any of the unsuccessful candidates, so those who ran against the judges that were appointed on behalf of LeBlanc, they're not going to be able to show their scores because there are some tests and assessments that are set out to dictate and determine how qualified someone is based on their abilities to answer a certain set of questions and certain tests. I'm not really convinced that performance on an ability assessment is the holy grail for decision making though, and that's what really complicates the matter. If we want it to be bias free, okay, give everyone a standardized test and whoever scores the highest gets a position. Sounds fair, but I doubt it produces the best candidates. Tests typically, they try to gauge your memory retention and the ability to think fast, but it does not take into account things like character, people skills, loyalty, honesty, and all those things are integral in being a judge and being a good one. Now this opens the door to value judgments, and that is why we have people picking their friends and masking it under the guise of unbiased selection. No job hiring process is really just a test. So I don't see why something like the judicial appointment system should be any different. That's where the problem is. What do we do to limit corruption when forced to take into account these somewhat subjective measures? Well, one way is through an independent ethics commission or something like that observes all the appointments and they vet for any conflicts. At the same time, they need a second thing, which is the power to deny and shut down an application. Maybe not complete power, they shouldn't be able to veto anything, but it should ideally be a mix across the board. Get the PM, get them to give their say, and maybe some members of the opposition to make sure it's not entirely biased. A balance really is the best way to go, because this whole concept of not hiring anyone because you have a connection to them, it's not entirely 100% logical to make that claim. In this case, it's very obvious that LeBlanc is pulling the cards because look at it. 5 of the last 6 judges are strongly connected to him. That's obviously BS. But what if it was just one? And it also matters what that connection is. There is a difference between your neighbor or your personal lawyers, and which is what happened with LeBlanc, making it very obvious that what he's doing is nepotism. But what if it was someone who you worked with on a federal project, a team member? That's someone you have a connection with. You could be friends too, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're hiring them just because of that. What I'm trying to get at is that a case-by-case process to determine the legitimacy of these elections and these appointments is probably one of the better ways to go about things. It will limit bias, and it's still complicated though, because even with that, it's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely better than what we currently have. Sometimes your friends may be the best candidate, that's a given, but when 5 of the last 6 judges are tied closely to an MP, it's a massive red flag. And at this point, I'm still not sure why LeBlanc has not resigned yet. It's really an atrocity, and I feel like it deserves so much attention. This is one of the reasons why government can become inefficient. You really do want the best of the best in these positions. Government is so important because unlike certain industries, the government, everything they do trickles down to the citizens and everyone in Canada as a whole. Even if it's just a new Brunswick judge, they set precedents and people learn from each other. Having a complete fool in a position of power just because they are friends with a politician is literally the worst case scenario, and it just screams corruption to me. Something has to be done about that, and hopefully it happens soon because it's just disgusting. Canada does not want to be tied to headlines like that, especially coming up to an election. And look at that too. As I've mentioned, it's not just LeBlanc. It has to be a concentrated effort to pull strings like this. The Liberal Party obviously knew what was happening. They have to be on top of it. They're the federal government. So it's either they're willfully blind or they're an active member in this corruption. Either way, it's not good, and it's making Canadians lose further trust in the Trudeau government. You have your MPs running amok and causing a mockery of the system like this. It's just unacceptable. And before we close off, I want to move on to a more kind of lighthearted story. And it's dedicated towards all the press attention that Kawhi Leonard is getting. It's really ridiculous. So today, I was watching CP24, trying to find some content, and they had a whole 30-minute segment of trying to basically stalk the MLSC jet. So I guess they went to Kawhi to go meet with him in LA or something, and they flew back, and they had basically a drone or a helicopter giving an aerial shot of the plane as people were leaving it. And then the commentators were like, oh, who's that? Who's that? We can't really make out their face. Could it be Kawhi? Could it be this? And it just screams a fanatic to me. It's insane. They're idolizing a basketball player to that level when there's so many more pressing items that I would rather them see talk about. It's a news network, and they're spending so much time focusing on madness. And it's not even news. They're just stalking these guys, and we don't even know who they were or what they were doing. Then it gets even worse. Those executives or whoever they were, basketball players, whatever, they load into these 2 SUVs and they're driving on the highway going to who knows where. Then they have the CP24 helicopter follow these guys on the highway throughout their course. And the Spectator news reporter was like, oh, where are they going? Which highway is this? Is it north or south? And it was so cringe to me. There has to be something better to talk about. It's just embarrassing. But at the same time, viewers are eating that up. People are actively tweeting like, oh my God, can you zoom in closer? And they're really hooked onto that content. You can recognize that he's good at basketball. But to want to be like Kawhi or to put him on a pedestal, a godlike figure, you don't really even know this guy. He doesn't really show too much of himself in the media. And even those media representations of celebrities, it's hard to trust those. To me, it's kind of silly that people are just, I don't know, so infatuated with someone who was only here for a year. He's considering leaving. Like someone like DeMar DeRozan, he didn't even want to take any meetings with any other teams. He just wanted to be in Toronto. He was the embodiment of a trait called loyalty. I'm not too sure which virtue people are looking to Kawhi to be a symbol of. Maybe focus or something. But what I'm trying to get at is that people seem to have, nowadays, a certain view on celebrity culture, and they eat it up like crazy. They idolize these people. And that just makes me wonder if that's really the best approach for young people. So there's certain things about that you can do more effectively. It's fine to look up to someone for something that they're good at. If you think Kawhi is a great basketball player, that's fine. But to think he is a role model for other things, it's unproven, and it seems like it can set you up for disaster or misery, especially if he leaves. Everyone's so emotionally attached, and it kind of hurts me to see that because, I don't know, people seem to be looking for a means of connection in places that aren't appropriate. There seems to be an abundance of bad things to look at and not that many good things to look towards too. So maybe that factors into this whole equation as well, because this is a good thing. The Raptors winning a championship and people are riding that wave for as long as they can or something. So that about brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at PerryPlatform. You can ask me questions there. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.